This is Talkin to America. I'm your host, Aaron Zellman. Our guest today is David Codrea. David is the author, David, of The War on Guns, a blog?
I guess that's as good a term as any, yeah.
Okay. Why don't we start by talking about your blog, The War on Guns?
Okay, sure, thank you. The URL for that is warongguns.blogspot.com. And basically what I try to do with this is use it to comment on gun rights-related news stories, things of interest to the gun-owning community, particularly those who are interested in the liberty aspect of it. I use it to present original commentary. I use it to support various causes that I believe in that are Second Amendment related. I also use it to promote my column in Guns Magazine. I have a couple of recurring features on the blog. One of them is called The Only Ones. And what this is about is that oftentimes, I'm sure you've heard, people will say, well, the police are the only ones who are competent or trustworthy enough to be armed, and the general citizenry isn't trained enough. And the purpose of The Only Ones really is not to diss the law enforcement establishment so much as to provide links to examples in news stories where they prove themselves to be just as fallible, if not more so, than anyone else, and essentially to disprove the fraud that the police are the only ones who are competent enough to be trusted with firearms. And where we got the name from that is, I don't know if you recall the DEA agent by the name of Lee Page, who was giving a presentation to a group of school children in the classroom, and he pulls out his Glock and he says, I'm the only one in the room professional enough to handle this, and proceeds on camera to shoot himself in the foot. So The Only One's kind of stuck, and right now I just have hundreds and hundreds of examples of that on the website.
Sounds fascinating. Before we forget, you have a monthly column in Guns Magazine. It's called Rights Watch?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for mentioning that one. I started out writing actually for Guns and Ammo, and did that on an occasional basis for probably about a year and a half or two. Moved on to Handguns Magazine when the editor, Jeff John, went over to that magazine. And then he went over to Guns, and he invited me to come on board full-time. So I am a Rights Watch columnist. I guess the official title in the masthead is contributing field editor. And what I do with that is they let me explore whatever issue I really think needs to be brought to the attention of the readership as it pertains to the Second Amendment. And I try to do these things in a way that's contemporary, in a way that touches on the popular culture so that people can relate to it, kind of a shallow end of the pool approach, a populist approach, if you will. And I explore everything from celebrities and their anti-gun status to legal developments. The issue that's out right now on the stands is the February 2007 issue. And in this one, I feature a system developed by some friends of mine, Brian Puckett and Russ Howard, and it's called the BID system. And what this is, it's the Blind Identification Database System. It's an alternative that they've developed to the NICS, the National Instant Check System. And essentially what it does is it's already in practice at our airline terminals. It's called the no-fly list. What this allows is right now, if you go and buy a gun and go through the NICS system, they have to put you through an automated clearance, and it creates a record of your gun purchase. So now the government has a record that could, although right now it's prohibited by law, to be used to establish a registration system. If that law were to change, they would have all the data they need to identify gun owners in America and to essentially have an automated registration list that they can use. And I think that your organization has been pretty instrumental in pointing out some of the dangers of registration.
Well, indeed. I think that what we really need to do in America, the BID system is a step in the right direction, but from the JPFO perspective, I think we need to abolish all federal control and regulation of firearms. And nothing evil has come out of the 68 Gun Control Act.
I agree with you on that. What I'm looking at is a way to do it. You know, one of the things that I'm attacked on sometimes is that I'm an absolutist and that we got here incrementally and we have to back out of things incrementally. And so this actually, I admit that there is no federal authority for any kind of FedGov involvement in registration, in gun control. It's identical to the JPFO's position, but this is kind of a back at you guys. If you're saying we need incrementalism, here's one that will impose no new restrictions on gun owners. It will actually roll restrictions back. All that is going to be in the database are who are identified as quote-unquote prohibited persons. Now, we could get into a whole other discussion on prohibited persons. I think it's a ridiculous concept. I think if someone can't be trusted with a gun, they can't be trusted without a custodian. However, as long as we have a system in place, unless there is a realistic mechanism to go through and abolish, and I'm certainly willing to learn, how we can go about abolishing the ATF, short of some sort of lawsuit or short of some sort of electoral victory that I'm not sure I see happening in the near-time future. This is at least a step that will roll back some of the more egregious violations. And as I say, the technology is there, and the concept has already been proven via the no-fly lists.
Well, I think the way to abolish the BATFE, we're going to show people in our film that we're now working on called The Gang, which shows the criminal activities of the BATF. I think people will see a way in there, a method to approach the criminals known as the BATF, and that method will help people understand what steps have to be taken to abolish this government agency, as well as the federal control and regulation of firearms. But we'll wait till the movie comes out for me to continue to prattle on about that. In your column Rights Watch in Guns Magazine, you mentioned you have a review on a book by Matthew Bracken called The Reconquista.
Yes.
Well, it's not really a Second Amendment issue. You want to talk about that for a minute or so?
Well, it essentially is a Second Amendment issue because it's a sequel to his first book, Enemies Foreign and Domestic. And in that book, he establishes the character base, he establishes the scenario with a rogue ATF agency creating a criminal act which is used to further demands for gun control. And he explores that, and Domestic Enemies, the Reconquista, definitely is a Second Amendment issue because the bottom line is if the illegal immigration tide in this country is not swarmed, we're quickly going to find ourselves in a balkanized situation. And we're quickly going to find ourselves in a situation where in many locales civil order is going to break down, people are going to be on their own, and people are going to be on their own against organized groups. I don't believe that it's that far-fetched when we take a look at other world events that have happened when disparate populations are competing for the same territory, and when we see the trends that have happened in this country, to think that, you know what, at some point in the future, there could be flashpoints. And that's what this book explores. I think it's an important book. I think as far as JPFO is concerned, possibly his first book, Enemies Foreign and Domestic, would be something that would be of more interest to your members. But I think once you have that as the foundation established, I think that people are going to really like The Reconquista, which is the sequel. And I should say that Matthew Bracken, the author of these books, eminently qualified to do the writing on this. They're first of all, they're page turners. They're real thrillers. But he's got a fascinating background. He's a former Navy SEAL. He builds his own sailboats and sails them, I guess, essentially around the world. So the guy is a real fascinating character, and he comes from a perspective with a real intimate knowledge of weaponry, with some good, fresh political perspectives. And like I say, he's just a good writer. I really do enjoy reading his stuff, and I've reviewed both of his books in Guns Magazine and given them 2 M1 thumbs up if people understand what that means.